The air in the courtroom was thick with a silence that felt heavier than sound. Amelia Grant sat perfectly still, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were bone white. Across the aisle, her husband Ethan wouldn't look at her. He sat shoulder to shoulder with Chloe, his business partner, and the woman who had dismantled Amelia's life. They looked like a power couple, dressed in tailored navy blue, whispering to their high-priced lawyer, Marcus Thorne. They were the picture of confidence. Amelia had only her tired, public defender-spirited lawyer, Miss Davies, and a truth she was terrified no one would believe. She was alone, outmaneuvered, and on the verge of losing everything: her home, her children, her dignity. Everyone in that room, from the bailiff to the stenographer, thought they knew how this would end. The rich, powerful husband always wins. But they hadn't counted on Judge Thompson, a man whose stern face betrayed nothing, and a secret buried on a forgotten hard drive that was about to change everything. Life in the suburbs of Bellevue, Washington, was a carefully curated masterpiece for Amelia Grant. From the outside, theirs was the life featured in magazines, the sprawling modern home with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Sammamish, the twin Teslas in the garage, the two bright, beautiful children, 14-year-old Lily and 10-year-old Sam. And at the center of it all was Ethan Grant, the charismatic founder and CEO of Innovate Dynamics, a tech firm that had exploded onto the scene with its revolutionary logistics software. Amelia was the architect of their perfect domestic world. She had set aside her own promising career in architectural design to raise their children and create a sanctuary for Ethan to return to after his long, demanding days. She managed the school runs, the parent-teacher conferences, the charity galas, and the seamless running of a household that was more akin to a small corporation. She did it all with a quiet grace, believing she was the essential silent partner in their shared success. The first crack in this perfect facade wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a lipstick-stained collar. It was far more insidious. It was the slow, creeping chill of absence. Ethan, who had once shared every detail of his day, now offered only vague summaries. The meeting ran late, became his nightly mantra. His phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, was now perpetually in his hand, angled away from her. When she tried to touch his arm in bed, he would flinch almost imperceptibly, murmuring about being stressed from work. Doubt is a patient poison. At first, Amelia dismissed it. The pressure of running a multi-million-dollar company was immense. This was just a phase, but the phase stretched from weeks into months. The distance between them grew into a chasm. He stopped complimenting her, stopped asking about her day, stopped seeing her. He looked through her as if she were just another piece of the expensive furniture in their home. The tangible proof arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, disguised as a digital notification from their joint premium bank account. An alert for a purchase at Tiffany & Co. for $18,450. Amelia frowned. Her birthday was months away, as was their anniversary. Perhaps he was buying an early extravagant gift. A surge of hope fluttered in her chest. That evening she prepared his favorite meal, pan-seared scallops with a lemon butter sauce. She put on a dress he used to love and waited. He came home late as usual, dropping his briefcase by the door with a heavy sigh. "You're still up," he said, not as a question, but as a statement of mild annoyance. He loosened his tie, his eyes already scanning the emails on his phone. "I made your favorite," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "I thought we could have a nice dinner, just the two of us." "Amelia, I'm exhausted. I have a 7 a.m. call with the Tokyo office. I'm just going to grab a protein bar and head up." He didn't even look at the beautifully set table. The hope in her chest curdled into a cold knot of dread. She had to know. "Ethan," she began, trying to keep her voice steady. "I got a notification from the bank today, from Tiffany's." He froze for a fraction of a second, his thumb hovering over his phone screen. It was all the confirmation she needed, but he recovered quickly. "Ah, yes. Corporate gift. For a major client's wife in Japan, sealing a big expansion deal. You know how it is." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it terrified her. He didn't even have the decency to stumble. An 18,000 torolos corporate gift. It was plausible enough to make her feel insane for doubting it, yet her gut screamed that it was a lie. That night she lay in their king-sized bed, the space between them, feeling like a frozen lake. She listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing and felt utterly, completely alone. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that the necklace wasn't in a gift box destined for Tokyo. It was likely already gracing the neck of another woman. The gilded cage she had so lovingly built had become her prison, and she was just beginning to realize the door had been locked from the outside. The next few weeks were a quiet, agonizing torture. Amelia became a detective in her own home, a ghost haunting the life she thought was hers. She started paying attention to the details she had previously ignored. The scent of an unfamiliar expensive perfume that lingered in his car, the hushed, clipped phone calls he would take out on the patio, the name that kept popping up in his conversations about work, Chloe Sterling, his COO, younger, sharper, with a relentless ambition that Ethan openly admired. "Chloe is a killer," he'd say with a proud smile. "She closes deals nobody else can." Amelia had met her a few times at company events. Chloe was everything Amelia wasn't, any more sleek, fiercely intelligent, dressed in power suits, her life revolving around boardrooms and billion-dollar projections. Amelia had always felt a pang of professional envy, but now it was eclipsed by a far more primal fear. The confirmation came from the last place she expected their 10-year-old son, Sam. He was showing her a picture he'd taken on Ethan's iPad. "Look, Mum, this is Dad's office. He let me play games on his tablet when I visited last weekend." As he swiped through the photos, he landed on one that made Amelia's breath catch in her throat. It was a selfie clearly taken by accident. Ethan was in the background laughing at his desk, but the foreground was dominated by a woman's face, her blonde hair falling across the frame. It was Chloe, and around her neck, shimmering against her skin, was a diamond and platinum necklace. Amelia recognized the distinctive design from the Tiffany's website. The world tilted on its axis. The abstract fear, the gnawing suspicion, had just become a high-resolution, undeniable reality. That evening, she waited for him in his home office, the iPad sitting on the polished mahogany desk between them. When he walked in, he saw her face, saw the device, and for the first time, the mask of indifference slipped. He didn't even try to lie. "So you know," he said, his tone flat, as if discussing a dip in the stock market. "How could you, Ethan?" The words were a raw whisper. "In our life, in our home." "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Amelia," he scoffed, dropping into his leather chair. "This home was built by my money, my work. You think this all just appeared out of thin air. I gave up my career for you, for this family. You designed a few houses for your friends, Amelia. I built a global empire." He retorted, his voice dripping with condescension. "Let's be realistic. Our marriage has been a business arrangement for years. You managed the domestic side, I handled the rest. The arrangement is simply ending." The coldness of his words was like a physical blow. There was no remorse, no apology, just a brutal bottom-line assessment. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, sliding it across the desk towards her. These are divorce papers. My lawyer Marcus Thorne, you know, from Sterling Thorne and Associates, drew them up. It's a very generous offer. I'll give you the downtown condo and a settlement that will keep you comfortable for a few years until you get back on your feet." Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Generous was a grotesque mischaracterization. The settlement was a pittance, a fraction of what they had built together. The condo was one of their smaller investment properties, and the custody agreement was the final devastating blow. He was petitioning for primary custody of Lily and Sam, citing his superior financial ability to provide for them. "You want to take my children?" she gasped, horrified. "I can give them the life they're accustomed to," he said coolly. "What can you give them? You haven't worked in 15 years. You have no income. No judge is going to give them to a mother with no financial stability. Be smart about this, Amelia. Take the deal. If you fight me, I will bury you. I'll use every dollar I have to prove you're an unstable, unfit mother. You will walk away with nothing. Not the house, not the money, and not the kids." Chloe's influence was all over this brutal strategy. This was a corporate takeover, not the end of a marriage. He was severing a non-performing asset. That asset was her. "Get out!" She choked out tears, finally streaming down her face. "This is my house, Amelia," he said, standing up. "Actually, you're the one who will be leaving. I'll have a courier send over the details of your temporary accommodations. Chloe is moving in this weekend. It's time to streamline." He walked out of the room without a backward glance, leaving Amelia surrounded by the opulent trappings of a life that was no longer hers. The demolition had been swift, total, and utterly merciless. She wasn't just losing a husband, she was being erased. The 2 weeks that followed were a blur of humiliation and dislocation. True to his word, Ethan had her move into a sterile, furnished apartment. He owned a place devoid of warmth or memory. Her clothes and a few personal items were delivered in boxes by a moving company. The sprawling family home, the one she had poured her heart into, designing and decorating, was now forbidden territory, occupied by the woman who had replaced her. The most excruciating part was the children. Ethan had masterfully spun the narrative. He told them that their mother was going through a difficult time and needed some space, a story that painted Amelia as volatile and unstable. He sweetened the poison by showering Lily and Sam with gifts: a new gaming console, for Sam a horse-riding camp for Lily. When they visited her in the small, impersonal apartment, they were confused and distant. "Dad said you were sad." Lily said, her 14-year-old eyes filled with a mixture of pity and suspicion. "Are you going to get a job now?" The question, innocent as it was, felt like a judgment. How could she explain that her job for the last 15 years had been them finding legal representation was another circle of hell? Ethan's company, Innovate Dynamics, had connections everywhere. The first 2 high-profile divorce attorneys she consulted politely declined her case, citing conflicts of interest. Their firms represented partners or investors tied to Ethan. The third lawyer was blunt. "Mrs. Grant," the portly man said, peering at her over his glasses. "Your husband has Marcus Thorne. Thorne doesn't lose. He'll drag this out, bleed you dry, and paint you as a vindictive shrew. The settlement your husband offered, I suggest you take it. It's the best you're going to get." Despair began to set in. Ethan's threat to bury her wasn't an exaggeration. It was a business plan. Her friends, once a robust support network, became scarce. Some were wives of Ethan's colleagues and were forced to choose sides. Others simply didn't know what to say, offering awkward platitudes before retreating. She was alone, isolated, and rapidly running out of money and options. It was through a recommendation from a legal aid clinic that she found Martha Davies. Her office was a world away from the gleaming downtown towers of Marcus Thorne. It was a small, cluttered space above a bakery smelling faintly of sugar and coffee. Miss Davies was in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanour. She wore a practical pantsuit and listened to Amelia's entire story without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When Amelia finished, her voice raw with emotion, Miss Davies leaned back in her squeaky chair. "He's playing a classic, scorched earth game, Amelia," she said, her voice calm but firm. "He's banking on you being too intimidated and too broke to fight back. Marcus Thorne will use every dirty trick in the book. He'll subpoena your credit card statements to show you're frivolous, talk to old friends to dig up dirt, and try to prove you contributed nothing to the marital assets. He will try to break you." "Can we win?" Amelia asked the question, hanging in the air. "Winning isn't the right word, Ms. Davies replied honestly. "Surviving is more like it. They have unlimited resources. We have the truth. In a courtroom that sometimes isn't enough. We have to be smarter. We can't fight them on their terms. We have to find a different battlefield." Amelia hired her. Her retainer took the last of her personal savings. The contrast between the two legal teams was stark. Ethan had a team of lawyers from a prestigious firm. Amelia had Miss Davies and a part-time paralegal named Ben. The initial stages of the legal process were a brutal confirmation of Miss Davies's warnings. Marcus Thorne filed motion after motion, burying them in paperwork. He requested years of financial records, demanding Amelia account for every dollar she had ever spent. During the deposition, Thorne was a predator. He questioned her for hours, his voice a silky, condescending drone. "Mrs. Grant, is it true that you haven't held a paying job since 2010? "Yes, and during that time, your husband built a company valued at over $900 million. What precisely was your contribution to that success?" "I raised our children. I ran our home so he could focus entirely on his work." "So you planned dinner parties? You would agree that a housekeeper and a nanny could perform those duties, wouldn't you?" He twisted her sacrifice into a narrative of laziness and dependency. He painted her as a freeloader who was now trying to cash in on her husband's genius. Ethan and Chloe sat in on the deposition, Chloe with a small, satisfied smirk on her face. Amelia walked out of that room feeling stripped bare, her entire life's work reduced to a demeaning caricature. Ethan was winning. He was isolating her, bankrupting her, and systematically destroying her reputation. She would go back to her empty apartment, the silence pressing in on her, and wonder if she had the strength to continue. The battleground was lonely. The enemy was overwhelming, and victory felt like an impossible dream. The months leading up to the trial were a slow, grinding war of attrition. Marcus Thorne's strategy was clear: to exhaust Amelia emotionally and financially before she ever set foot in a courtroom. He filed for a forensic psychological evaluation, a humiliating process designed to find any hint of instability that could be used against her in the custody battle. He deposed her friends, twisting their words to fit his narrative. A comment Amelia had made in jest about being overwhelmed by the kids was reframed as a confession of maternal inadequacy. Ethan, meanwhile, continued his campaign to win the children's loyalty. He took them on a surprise trip to Disneyland, bought Lily the thoroughbred horse she'd always dreamed of, and set Sam up with a state-of-the-art virtual reality gaming system. In comparison, Amelia's weekends with them, in her cramped apartment, filled with board games and trips to the local park, felt painfully inadequate. "Why can't we just live with Dad?" Sam asked one Sunday evening, his voice small. "His house has the pool, and all my friends are there." The words were like a dagger to Amelia's heart. He didn't understand. He just knew one parent offered a world of limitless fun, and the other offered quiet afternoons and sad eyes. One evening, buried under a mountain of financial discovery documents Miss Davies had sent over, Amelia felt the suffocating weight of defeat. She was poring over statements from Innovate Dynamics, trying to understand the complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts Ethan had created. It was hopeless. She was an architect, not a forensic accountant. She felt stupid and out of her depth. Dejected, she pushed the legal papers aside and turned to a task she had been dreading, sorting through the last few boxes from her old life. They were filled with memories from before Ethan's success, from a time when they were just two ambitious young people with big dreams. There were old photo albums, college textbooks, and a box labeled University Projects, Architecture. She sat on the floor and pulled out dusty binders and portfolios. It was a lifetime ago. She had been at the top of her class, a promising young architectural designer, with a fascination for algorithmic design, using code to create efficient and organic living spaces. Her thesis project had been a software concept she called Spatial Logic, a program that could optimize building layouts for energy efficiency and human traffic flow. It had been groundbreaking at the time. She remembered showing it to Ethan, her eyes alight with passion. He was a business student then, with a knack for marketing, but little interest in the technical side. He'd glanced at her complex diagrams and lines of code. "It's a bit niche, isn't it, Ames?" he'd said kindly. "Who's going to buy software to design a slightly better hallway? Focus on the big buildings, the real money." She had been deflated, but had pushed on, completing the project and getting top marks. Then life happened. They got married. She got pregnant with Lily and Ethan's first business venture, a failed startup. Importing novelty gadgets took up all their time and money. Her niche project was packed away and forgotten. Rummaging deeper in the box, her fingers brushed against something hard and plastic. It was an old external hard drive, a bulky silver rectangle from the early 2000s. A label written in her own neat handwriting read, "SL Thesis Backup." A jolt went through her. It was a relic from another era. She had no idea if it still worked, or if she even had the right cables to connect it. The next day she took it to a small computer repair shop, run by a tech wizard in his 20s. "Wow, this is a museum piece," the kid said, blowing dust out of a port. "A Firewire 400. Haven't seen one of these in a decade. Let me see what I can do." Amelia left it with him, not thinking much of it. It was just a painful reminder of the career she had sacrificed. That afternoon, she had another demoralizing meeting with Miss Davies. "Thorne is making a motion to seal the company's financial records." Miss Davies said, her face grim. "He's claiming proprietary trade secrets. It's a tactic to hide assets, and the judge is leaning towards granting it. We're getting stonewalled at every turn, Amelia." Amelia felt the last vestiges of her hope begin to crumble. Ethan was going to successfully argue that he was the sole genius behind his empire, and that she had no right to its details, let alone its profits. She was just the wife, an incidental figure in his heroic story. As she was leaving Miss Davies's office, her phone rang. It was the tech from the repair shop. "Ma'am, I got the drive working," he said, a note of excitement in his voice. "Managed to pull all the data off. There's a lot of stuff on here, architectural renderings, essays, and a folder full of source code and a detailed project proposal. It's some kind of spatial organization algorithm. The timestamps on the core files are from October 2007. Amelia stopped dead on the sidewalk. October 2007. A full 2 years before, Ethan had come up with the idea for the software that would become the foundation of Innovate Dynamics. "Can you email it all to me?" she asked, her heart beginning to pound in her chest. Everything. Every single file. Back in her apartment, she opened the zip file. There it was. Her thesis. Her project proposal for spatial logic. And folder after folder of raw code meticulously commented in her own style. It was all there, frozen in time. With trembling hands, she opened a web browser and began to research the origins of Innovate Dynamics. The company's official story, parroted in dozens of tech articles and interviews with Ethan, was that he conceived of the idea in late 2009, after being frustrated with warehouse inefficiencies. She started reading technical articles about their proprietary software, Logicore 1.0. The descriptions were vague, filled with marketing jargon. But then she found a deep dive analysis on a programming blog. The author had reverse-engineered parts of the initial public code. He described the software's foundational principle, a node-based spatial optimization algorithm that organized data points in the most efficient physical path. Amelia's blood ran cold. It was her language, her methodology. It wasn't just similar to her university project. It was its direct commercial application. He hadn't just dismissed her idea. He had stolen it, repackaged it, and built his entire empire on her intellectual foundation. The weight of the past which had been crushing her suddenly felt different. It was no longer a burden of sacrifice. It was a weapon. A quiet, forgotten hard drive in a dusty box held a truth more powerful than all of Ethan's money and all of Marcus Thorne's lies. For the first time in months, a flicker of fierce, burning hope ignited within her. The battlefield was about to change. The discovery transformed Amelia. The fog of victimhood began to lift, replaced by a cold, clear fury. This wasn't just about infidelity or a cruel divorce anymore. This was about the theft of her identity, her intellect, and her legacy. Ethan hadn't just left her. He had erased her contribution to their shared life and claimed it as his own. She called Miss Davies immediately, her voice steady and sharp. "Martha, I need you to meet me. I've found something. Something big." They met in a corner booth of a quiet diner, the old hard drive and a laptop sitting between them. Amelia walked Miss Davies through her university thesis, the project proposal, the dated source code, and then laid out the articles describing the core technology of Innovate Dynamics. Miss Davies, a woman not easily impressed, stared at the screen, her expression shifting from focused concentration to stunned realization. She read Amelia's original proposal, her lips moving silently, then read the tech blog's analysis of Logicore 1.0. "My God," she whispered, looking up at Amelia with new eyes. "He didn't just build a company while you were married. He built it on your foundation. This isn't just a marital asset, Amelia. This is the seed from which the entire forest grew. This changes everything." The energy in their small, outmatched legal team shifted. This was no longer a defensive battle of damage control. They now had a sword, but they had to be careful how they wielded it. "Thorne and Ethan will never see this coming." Miss Davies strategized, her mind racing. "They think you're just a housewife. They've built their entire case around that narrative. We can't reveal our hand until the moment it will do the most damage in the courtroom in front of the judge." Their first move was to hire a highly respected, independent software forensics expert, a professor from MIT, named Dr. Alistair Finch. They sent him the files from the hard drive and the publicly available information on Logicore 1.0 under a strict non-disclosure agreement. They couldn't afford to let any of this leak. While they waited for Dr. Finch's report, Ms. Davies used the newfound knowledge to subtly alter her approach. During a pre-trial hearing regarding asset division, Marcus Thorne was waxing lyrical about Ethan's singular genius. "Your Honor, Mr. Grant, is a once-in-a-generation innovator, Thorne declared. Innovate Dynamics was born from his unique vision in 2009, long after Mrs. Grant had chosen to abandon her own professional pursuits. Ms. Davies rose. Objection, Your Honour. Assumes facts not in evidence. We contest the assertion that the unique vision for the company originated solely with Mr. Grant in 2009. Thorne and Ethan exchanged a look of amused contempt. What could she possibly be contesting? It was the company's founding myth. Judge Thompson, a thoughtful, stern man in his 60s, looked at Ms. Davies with a flicker of interest. On what grounds, counsel? We believe evidence will show that the foundational intellectual property for the company's core technology existed prior to 2009, and was in fact marital property, Miss Davies said calmly. Thorne laughed out loud. Your Honour, this is a desperate fishing expedition. Is she going to claim she helped him pick out the company logo? The judge silenced him with a glare. The assertion has been noted, Ms. Davies. Be prepared to substantiate it at trial. It was a small moment, but for Amelia it felt monumental. For the first time, a seed of doubt had been planted in the official record. Ethan's smirk faltered for just a second. A week later, Dr. Finch's report came in. It was 100 pages of dense technical analysis, but the conclusion written in clear, damning language was on the final page, after a comprehensive analysis of the source code provided from the 2007 Spatial Logic project and a structural comparison to the known architecture of Innovate Dynamics, LogiCore 1.0. It is my expert opinion that the former is unequivocally the direct progenitor of the latter. The core algorithmic structure, data handling methods, and logical flow are not merely similar, they are functionally identical in principle. The LogiCore 1.0 software is a commercial expansion and optimization of the foundational work present in the spatial logic code. The probability of two developers independently creating such identical complex structures is statistically negligible. Amelia read the words over and over. Unequivocally the direct progenitor. Statistically negligible. It was the objective scientific validation of her truth. Ms. Davies had it notarized and sealed. This report was their silver bullet. In the final days before the trial, Amelia's demeanor changed. The fear that had haunted her for months was replaced by a steely resolve. She saw her children, heard their confused questions, and felt not despair but a protective fire. Ethan hadn't just stolen from her. He had stolen the truth of their family's history from her children. He had taught them that their mother's contribution was worthless. She was no longer fighting for money. She was fighting for her story, for her children's understanding of who she was, and for the brilliant young woman she had once been. She and Ms. Davies worked late into the night preparing for her testimony. They didn't just prepare for the lies Marcus Thorne would throw at her. They prepared to tell a story that started not with a wedding or a baby, but in a university computer lab with a young woman and a ground-breaking idea. The sword was sharpened, and she was ready for battle. The first day of the trial unfolded exactly as Miss Davies had predicted. Marcus Thorne, in his opening statement, painted a masterful portrait of Ethan Grant as a visionary genius and Amelia as a pampered, discontented wife who enjoyed the fruits of his labor but contributed nothing to it. He was charismatic and convincing. For 15 years, Thorne boomed his voice, resonating through the solemn courtroom. Ethan Grant worked 18-hour days, sacrificing, innovating, and building a titan of industry. And what did Amelia Grant do? She spent. She decorated. And now, when the marriage is over, she wants to claim half of a kingdom she did nothing to build. When Ethan took the stand, he was the picture of confidence and reluctant sorrow. He spoke of his passion for his work, his love for his children, and his profound disappointment that his marriage had failed. He answered Thorne's questions smoothly, reinforcing the narrative of his solitary brilliance. "Mr. Grant, when did you first conceive of the idea for Logicor, the software that launched your company?" Thorne asked. "It was the fall of 2009. Ethan said, his voice earnest. "I had a eureka moment. I was touring a chaotic warehouse, and I just knew there had to be a better, more logical way to organize physical space. The idea came to me fully formed." Amelia watched him, a man she had loved, lie so effortlessly under oath. There was no flicker of hesitation, no hint of shame. Her heart didn't break. It hardened. When it was Miss Davies's turn to cross-examine, she was calm and methodical. She asked a few simple questions about the company's early days, letting Ethan dig his hole a little deeper, reaffirming the 2009 timeline. He was smug, comfortable. He thought this small-time lawyer was no match for him. Then came Amelia's turn to testify. As she walked to the witness stand, she could feel Chloe's hostile glare from the gallery. She smoothed her simple navy dress, took a deep breath, and met Judge Thompson's impassive gaze. Miss Davies led her through the early years of her marriage and her education. When she began to speak about her architectural thesis, Marcus Thorne objected. "Relevance, Your Honor. We're not here to discuss Mrs. Grant's college art projects. I believe its relevance will become clear, Your Honor," Miss Davies stated. "Please bear with me." The judge nodded. "I'll allow it, for now." Amelia described her spatial logic project, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke about the complex ideas she had once mastered. Then Miss Davies placed the old silver hard drive on the evidence table. "Amelia, can you identify this object?" "It's my university backup drive from 2007, she replied. At the defendant's table, Ethan stiffened. A flicker of something annoyance, confusion crossed his face. Miss Davies then called her expert witness, Dr. Alistair Finch. Dr. Finch was the quintessential academic, unflappable precise, and utterly credible. He explained his credentials and his methodology. Then Miss Davies projected 2 columns of code onto the large screen in the courtroom. On the left, a sample from Amelia's spatial logic. On the right, a publicly available snippet from the core of Logicor 1.0. "Dr. Finch, Miss," Davies asked, "can you explain to the court what we are looking at?" "Certainly," the professor said, adjusting his glasses. "On the left, we have a foundational algorithm written by Mrs. Grant in 2007. On the right, the commercial algorithm at the heart of Innovate Dynamics. As you can see, the structure, the variable naming conventions, the entire logical architecture is fundamentally the same. The one on the right is more complex, more developed, but it is built upon the identical intellectual framework as the one on the left." A murmur went through the courtroom. Ethan Grant went pale. Chloe leaned forward, whispering furiously to Marcus Thorne, whose confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a look of disbelief. "In your expert opinion, Dr. Finch, what is the likelihood that Mr. Grant could have conceived of this idea fully formed in 2009, independent of his wife's prior work?" "In my field," Dr. Finch stated, his voice carrying undeniable authority, "we would call that a statistical impossibility. One is clearly derived from the other." Miss Davies let the statement hang in the air before turning to face Ethan's lawyer. "Your witness, Mr. Thorne." Thorne, caught completely off guard, tried to attack Dr. Finch's credibility, but the professor calmly and methodically dismantled every one of his arguments with facts and data. Thorne then tried to suggest that perhaps Amelia had copied Ethan, but Dr. Finch pointed to the digital timestamps on the files from the hard drive, all securely dated to 2007. The foundation of Ethan's entire case had been shattered in 20 minutes. His narrative of the lone genius was a lie. He wasn't an innovator. He was a thief who had stolen his wife's dream and sold it to the world. The final act was recalling Ethan to the stand. He was visibly shaken, his arrogance replaced by a panicked fury. "Mr. Grant?" "Ms." Davies began, her voice cold as ice. "A moment ago you testified under oath that the idea for Logicor came to you in a eureka moment in 2009. Was that testimony true?" Ethan looked from Ms. Davies to the judge, his jaw tight. My wife's project was a college exercise. It was academic. My idea was a practical commercial application. They're completely different." "So you were aware of her project?" Ms. Davies pressed. "I may have seen it, yes. It was years ago. You saw it, dismissed it, and then 2 years later had a eureka moment that just happened to be the exact same idea, which you then failed to ever mention to her, the original creator, as you built a billion-dollar company upon it." Ethan stammered, contradicted himself, and looked at his lawyer for help, but there was none to be had. He was caught. The lie, once so seamless, was unraveling in public under the stern, watchful eye of Judge Thompson. Amelia sat at her table, her back straight, and for the first time she allowed herself to meet Chloe's gaze. The triumphant smirk was gone, replaced by the stark terror of someone whose calculated gamble had just spectacularly failed. The truth unveiled was more powerful than they could have ever imagined. The final day of the trial felt different. The tension was still there, but the power dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. Ethan and Chloe no longer looked like victors. They looked like defendants. Marcus Thorne's closing argument was weak and rambling, a desperate attempt to salvage the wreckage of their case. He argued that even if Ethan had been inspired by his wife's college project, it was his business acumen that built the empire, rendering her contribution negligible. Then Miss Davies stood to deliver her closing. She didn't shout or resort to theatrics. She spoke with a quiet, powerful conviction. For months, she began her eyes on Judge Thompson. "We have been told a story, the story of a brilliant man and his dependent wife. We have been asked to believe that one partner's contribution, the one that generates revenue, is all that matters. We've been told that raising children, managing a home, and creating the stability that allows for greatness is a worthless contribution. Today we learned that this narrative was not just insulting, it was a deliberate and calculated lie." She recounted the evidence, laying out the clear, undeniable path from Amelia's spatial logic to innovate dynamics. "Ethan Grant didn't just break his marital vows," she concluded. "He built his kingdom on a stolen map. Amelia Grant is not a gold digger seeking a handout. She is a founder seeking her rightful share of an empire built on her intellect. Justice in this case is not about a simple division of assets. It's about restoring a legacy." Judge Thompson listened to it, all his face unreadable. He then announced he would recess to review the evidence and would deliver his verdict and ruling at 2 p.m. The wait was agonizing. Amelia and Miss Davies sat in the courthouse cafeteria, sipping coffee neither of them wanted. "Whatever happens, Amelia," Ms. Davies said, reaching across the table to pat her hand, "you did it. You told the truth. You took your story back." At 2 p.m. they reassembled. The courtroom was silent. Judge Thompson entered, sat and looked down at the two parties. He took a long, deliberate moment before he spoke, his voice filling the room. "I have reviewed the testimony and the extensive evidence presented in this case," he began. "This court is not just a referee for dividing assets, it is a finder of fact, and the central fact of this case is that the intellectual property that forms the bedrock of the marital enterprise, Innovate Dynamics, was created by Mrs. Amelia Grant." Ethan flinched as if struck. Mr. Grant's testimony regarding the company's origin was not credible. The judge continued his gaze fixed on Ethan. He has perjured himself before this court and has perpetrated a fraud not just on the market, but on his partner in life, and as it turns out in business. He then began to read his ruling. It was a systematic dismantling of Ethan's entire world. First custody. Given Mr. Grant's demonstrated willingness to engage in deceit for personal gain, this court has concerns about his character. Primary physical and legal custody of the minor children, Lily and Sam Grant, is awarded to their mother, Amelia Grant. Amelia gasped, tears welling in her eyes. Second, the family home. The family residence in Bellevue will be awarded to Mrs. Grant to provide stability for the children. Third, alimony and child support. He awarded a substantial, almost punitive amount, ensuring Amelia and the children would want for nothing. But it was the final point, the division of the primary marital asset, the company that delivered the truly unexpected victory. Mr. Thorne argued that his client's business acumen built the company, and that is not in dispute, the judge said. However, a house cannot be built without a foundation. Mrs. Grant provided the foundation. Therefore, to award her a simple cash settlement based on current valuation would be an injustice. It would allow Mr. Grant to continue profiting from an asset that is fundamentally hers. He paused, looking directly at Amelia. Therefore, the court rules as follows. Innovate Dynamics is to be treated as a partnership. 50% of the ownership shares of the company held by Ethan Grant are to be transferred immediately to Amelia Grant. The sound in the room was a collective intake of breath. Marcus Thorne shot to his feet. Your Honor, that's unprecedented. It will cripple the company. Sit down, Mr. Thorne, the judge commanded. Perhaps your client should have considered that before he built his career on a lie. As a 50% shareholder, Mrs. Grant will now have the power she is owed. She is no longer a silent partner. She is a partner. This ruling is final. It was a total stunning victory, far beyond anything Amelia or Ms. Davies had dared to hope for. Amelia wasn't just getting a settlement, she was getting control. She was getting her legacy back in a way that could never be denied again. Ethan Grant sat slumped in his chair, his face ashen. Chloe stared blankly ahead, her meticulously planned future in ruins. They had been so certain of their power, so confident in their ability to crush the simple housewife. They had underestimated her. They had forgotten who she was before she was a wife and mother. She was a creator, an innovator, and today the world would know it. Amelia stood up, shook a stunned Miss Davies's hand, and walked out of the courtroom. She didn't look back at the wreckage of her old life. She walked out into the sunlight, her head held high, not as a victim, but as the rightful owner of her own future. The victory wasn't just that she had won. It was how she had won, not with vengeance, but with a truth that had been buried alive and had finally gloriously clawed its way back into the light. The walk from the courtroom was a surreal journey through a world that had suddenly tilted back onto its proper axis. The stale, recycled air of the courthouse gave way to the fresh, cool breeze of a Seattle afternoon. For months, Amelia had felt invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of her own life. Now, as people bustled past on the sidewalk, she felt intensely, vibrantly present. Ms. Davies walked beside her, her usually stern face broken by a wide, incredulous grin. 50% of the company, she kept murmuring, shaking her head. In 25 years of practicing law, I have never seen a ruling like that. He didn't just give you a settlement, he gave you a throne. Amelia could barely process it. The victory was so total, so absolute, it felt like a dream. I can't believe it's over, she whispered. It's not over, Amelia, Ms. Davies said, stopping and turning to face her. "It's just beginning. You're not just a single mother with a good settlement. You are now one of the most powerful women in the Pacific Northwest tech scene. They didn't just underestimate you in the courtroom. They're about to underestimate you in the boardroom." The word sent a thrill of equal parts terror and exhilaration through her. For the first time, she wasn't just thinking about survival. She was thinking about the future. Her first act was to go home. Her home. As she pulled into the long, familiar driveway, she saw a moving van parked near the front door. Chloe, ever the pragmatist, was not wasting any time. Amelia parked her modest sedan behind the truck and walked towards the house. Chloe emerged from the front door carrying a designer handbag. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "I hope you're happy." Chloe spat her voice tight. "You've ruined him. You've ruined everything." Amelia looked at the woman who had caused her so much pain, and she felt nothing but a distant pity. The fear and jealousy were gone, burned away by the trial. "Ethan ruined himself, Chloe," she said, her voice calm and even. "He built his success on a lie, and you were a willing co-investor. Some investments just don't pay off." She walked past Chloe without another word and stepped across the threshold of her own home. The house was a mess of boxes and scattered belongings. Chloe's things, her clothes, her art, her sterile, minimalist furniture, were being hauled away, exorcised from the space. Underneath it all, the bones of the home Amelia had created were still there. She walked through the rooms, running her hand along the cool stone of the fireplace she had designed, looking out the massive windows at the lake she loved. She was not a guest here. This was her castle, and the dragon had been slain. That evening, Lily and Sam arrived, dropped off by a court-appointed liaison. They were quiet, their faces etched with confusion. Amelia sat them down in the living room, the boxes now gone a fragile piece, settling over the house. She knew this was the most important conversation of her life. "I know the last few months have been awful and confusing," she began, her voice gentle. "And I know you love your father. That won't change. But there are some things you need to know about what happened." She didn't badmouth Ethan. Instead, she told them her story. She pulled out the old hard drive and her university portfolio. She showed them the designs, the code, and explained how her idea, her work, had become the company that had given them their life. She explained that all she had asked for was for that truth to be acknowledged. Lily, ever her father's defender, was skeptical at first. "But Dad said he came up with it all himself." "I know that's what he said," Amelia replied softly. "Sometimes people, especially when they become very successful, forget where they came from. They start to believe their own stories. The judge saw the truth in the work I did a long time ago. This company, this house, it wasn't just your father's. It was ours. I was always his partner, even when he forgot." Sam, who had been listening intently, looked at the complex diagrams from his mother's thesis. "You made that on the computer? That's cool." It was a small crack in the wall of confusion, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere in the house began to thaw. By reclaiming her own story, Amelia had given her children a new, more complete version of their own. They saw her not as the sad, abandoned mother, but as the brilliant, resilient woman she truly was. 2 weeks after the verdict, the first board meeting of the new Innovate Dynamics was called. Amelia walked into the glass-walled boardroom on the top floor of the company's skyscraper. The all-male board of directors, men who had only ever known her as the smiling wife at Christmas parties, fell silent. She took the seat at the head of the table, opposite the one that had always been Ethan's. Ethan was not there. He had resigned as CEO a condition of the transfer of shares. The man who sat in his place was a shell of his former self, a court-appointed interim CEO, tasked with managing the transition. Amelia was not the same woman who had been interrogated by Marcus Thorne. She was composed, prepared, and radiated an authority they had never seen. She didn't make a dramatic speech. She simply laid out her vision. She spoke of transparency, of ethical innovation, and of a new R&D division she intended to found based on the principles of sustainable architectural design and spatial logic, bringing the company full circle back to her original passion. Innovate Dynamics was built on a brilliant foundation, she said, her voice steady and clear. It's time we started acting like it. The men in the room stared, their expressions a mixture of shock and a dawning respect. She wasn't here to burn it all down. She was here to build it better. As for Ethan, his downfall was as swift as his ascent. Stripped of his CEO title and half his fortune, his aura of invincibility vanished. Chloe left him within a month, her ambition having no room for a fallen titan. He was investigated for perjury and securities fraud, for misrepresenting the company's origins to his initial investors. He was left with his money, but he had lost everything that mattered: his reputation, his company, his family. He was a king with no kingdom, a storyteller whose story no one believed anymore. 6 months later, Amelia stood on the balcony of her home, a mug of coffee warming her hands. Below, Lily and Sam were laughing as they skipped rocks on the lake. The house was filled with warmth and life again. At work, she was no longer just a shareholder. She was the Chief Innovation Officer, leading a team of bright young minds, finally bringing her original vision to life. She had faced the worst betrayal imaginable and had stood alone against a force that should have crushed her. But she had not only survived, she had triumphed. The judge had given her an unexpected victory, but it was her own buried truth that had provided the ammunition. She had reclaimed her home, her children, and her legacy, proving that the strongest foundations are not built with money or power, but with brilliance, resilience, and a truth that refuses to be forgotten. The story of Amelia Grant is a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of finding the light. It's a testament to the quiet strength of those who are underestimated and the incredible power that comes from reclaiming your own story. So many people face battles where they feel alone and outmatched, where the world seems designed to keep them down. But Amelia's journey shows us that resilience, intelligence, and one undeniable fact can be enough to topple an empire built on lies. If this story of justice and empowerment resonated with you, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps our channel reach more people who might need to hear a story of hope. Share this video with someone who appreciates a story of a true underdog victory, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We are dedicated to telling stories that matter, stories of strength in the face of adversity. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.